Ben Shapiro is really truly a remarkable reporter, and he's the editor at large of Breitbart.com. He entered UCLA at the age of 16 years old, and he does not sit down at a fight. And he is the author of the new book called Bullies. And I'm a fan of Ben's, and I wanted to put him on the air and talk about the book, because I think that really, Ben, what we're facing now is, when you have somebody from the labor unions coming out the other day saying, labor unions 100 years ago had no problem just saying what it was, and it's kill the rich. And people cheered. We are headed towards real trouble with bullies.
Yeah, we certainly are. And Glenn, you know this better than anybody because you've been standing up to bullies for virtually your entire career. But, I mean, when you look at how the left operates, the way that they operate nowadays, and it's infected the entire Democratic establishment, is they see us as morally deficient. They're not interested in having a simple political discussion. The reason that Mitt Romney lost this last election was not because he lost on policy. The exit polls showed that most Americans agreed with him on policy. It's not because they thought that President Obama is a good president. Most agree that President Obama is a really bad president.
Okay, can you stop saying hang on just a second, Ben. We've banned that guy's name. So can you just call him that guy or something? Because I'm almost in shock therapy with the use of that man's name so much.
Okay.
We can't take him anymore. So go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
just try your best.
Okay, I'll do my best. The fact is that the reason that Mitt Romney lost is because he was widely perceived as a bad guy. That guy's campaign, the president's campaign,
Thank you.
was designed to make Mitt Romney look like a horrible human being. If you just watch that campaign from the outside, the impression you got is that guy, the president, is a nice guy, because Mitt Romney kept saying over and over he's a nice guy. And the impression you got of Mitt Romney is that Mitt Romney is a racist, bigoted, sexist homophobe, because that's what the media and President Obama were pushing. And they do this so that they don't have to debate us. That's the whole point, to bully us into silence and to make the American public think these guys are all evil and they're all nasty. And that's why now we're in discussions about how do we reach out to the black and Hispanic community and convince them we're not racist. You can't convince them you're not racist. Once you've been tarred with that brush, there's no way to defeat that. The only answer is to fight back against these guys, and as that guy once said, punch back twice as hard. Okay,
so now here you are, and we're looking at the war with guns. They're bullying. I had a gun manufacturer call me and say all of his bank funding has been stopped because, and this is the second one now in just a couple of days, because the bank said we just can't do business with you. That's bullying. That's the federal government being their hands deeply in these banks. The bank's afraid, and they're just not going to do business because we can't handle it.
That's exactly right. I mean, look at even the media strategy on the whole gun control debate. What they've been doing, Sandy Hook, they're standing on the dead bodies, the kids from Sandy Hook, and they're saying, if you don't agree with our gun control proposals, it's because you're a bad person. It's because you don't care about these kids. They're not interested in discussing which policies actually best protect against violence. They're not interested in talking about the city of Chicago, which has tons of legislation and regulation and is the American center for gun violence. They're not interested in discussing any of that stuff. What they're interested in doing is sitting on their high horse and then looking at us and saying, you guys don't care about dead kids, and the reason you don't care about dead kids is because of politics. And it's despicable, and it really is evil. I mean, look, they're targeting the National Rifle Association. What does the NRA have to do with anything here? They're an interest group that's designed to defend the Second Amendment, but the media has them on and then berates them for not abandoning their position on the Second Amendment. There's been a lot of talk. I mean, you've seen it. A lot of talk about, violent video games and violence in the culture and kind of nastiness in the culture. I have yet to hear David Gregory have on the head of the ACLU and say, extreme defense of a broad interpretation of the First Amendment led to Sandy Hook. They don't do that. They only do it with right-wing interest groups, with conservative interest groups, because they use incidents like Sandy Hook as a club to wield against people on our side of the aisle.
The thing I like about your book is it makes the case on all of it. I mean, we've just talked Sandy Hook. You can talk Hobby Lobby. They're doing it. They did it with Chick-fil-A. They're doing it with the EPA, as you point out. We talked about it with the banks. It's race. It's all of it. It is silence people. Silence them, silence them, silence them. Make them afraid.
Yep. I mean, Glenn, look at what the best example of it is what they tried to do to you, right? I mean, if you take a look at what Media Matters, the David Brock organization, has been doing for years, what they do is they sit there at the behest of the federal government, at the behest of the White House. I mean, they have weekly meetings with the White House. And Media Matters sits there, and they monitor programs like yours, and they wait for you to say something that they then take out of context and misconstrue. And then they use it to launch boycotts against advertisers, trying to destroy advertisers' business based on false constructions of what people like you say, and that's specifically designed to get you to shut up. I mean, that's what they want to do. They have their two goals are one of two things has to happen. You either voluntarily stop talking, which isn't going to happen, or they try and shut you up. These are not pro First Amendment people. These are not pro free speech people. These are not pro civility people. They're not civil. We have to stop treating them as though civility is going to win the day. We had the moral high ground in the 2012 election, and we lost. The moral high ground doesn't do us a lot of good when we're fighting people who are absolutely.
Okay, so what do you? So I don't want to become everything I despise.
I don't think that we have to become everything we despise, but I do think that there is a Geneva Convention with regard to civility. I think that civility is like the Geneva Convention. If you operate in uniform, then the Geneva Conventions cover you. If you operate out of uniform, if you're a terrorist, the Geneva Conventions don't cover you. Right? If you look at civility, it's sort of the same way. If you operate within the bounds of, look, we all want to get the right thing done for the American people. We're just trying to figure out the best way to get there. That's a civil conversation we can all have. If it turns into them screaming at you that you're a racist, you sitting there defending yourself, I'm not a racist, and let's discuss policy, that's not going to help. That's a good recipe for losing.
I'm writing down the Geneva Convention for civility.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should develop that. I think that is absolutely.
In other words, we're stealing your idea, Beck.
I mean, I think that's. I just think that's. I think that's profound. I mean, I really do. What is the one thing that you think that A is coming our way that people aren't really putting together yet, and B, what is the one thing that you wish people could grab and say, guys, if you would just understand and do this, things would begin to change?
I think that the one thing I think that's coming our way is the kind of internationalization of American values on a broad level. The attempt to take American values and make them obsolete and make them obscene. You're now unpatriotic if you don't believe that we ought to sign on to the Kyoto Protocol. You're now unpatriotic if you don't believe that we ought to sign on to Agenda 21. You're unpatriotic if you don't believe that we ought to sacrifice traditional American values in favor of this kind of internationalism. And if we don't see this coming, and you see it played out domestically, I mean, on the fiscal cliff debate, the class warfare stuff that they're pushing, I mean, that's been pushed in Europe for years. And the idea is that if we defend free enterprise, that makes us bad people. If we don't see this coming, then we're going to lose the debate. And the way to push back against it is to label people what they are. These people are anti-patriotic. They're anti-patriotic. They don't believe in patriotism. They don't believe in American values. All the leftists who are out there talking about how they believe in the Second Amendment, but then they want a UN treaty on gun control. You don't get to have it both ways.
Yeah, you're not unpatriotic. You're an anti-constitutionalist. You're against the Constitution and the Declaration of the United States of America, and that they can't defend because you can show them all the time. The idea that people are patriotic or not patriotic, I don't even know what patriotic means anymore.
Right.
I really don't know.
This is what they've done. They've redefined patriotism to mean anything they want it to mean. They say that dissent is patriotism, which is basically saying that being unpatriotic is patriotic. I mean, dissent, it depends what you're dissenting to and what you're dissenting from. And they've created these slogans. I mean, right now, if you dissent from from that guy, then you are not going to. Then you're unpatriotic, right? If you dissented from George W. Bush, then you're patriotic, according to the left. They've completely hijacked the term patriotism to mean that if you flag burn, that is the highest form of patriotism. But if you don't think that people should be allowed to flag burn, then you're unpatriotic. I mean, they've completely skewed it. So you're exactly right, Glenn. I mean, you've been on this for a while. The Constitution and the Declaration of Independence are the documents that matter, and we have to make an affirmative case for them again. I mean, people don't read the Federalist Papers. They don't know about it. People don't know the basis for the Second Amendment. They think the basis for the Second Amendment is that you should be able to hunt. That's not the basis for the Second Amendment, and anybody who reads the Federalist Papers knows it. We have to make an affirmative case again for why I mean, it's sad that we have to do this, but this is what the left has done with their bully tactics, with their polarization of America. They've turned it into, if you defend the Constitution, it's because you're a racist. Because after all, the Constitution enshrined the 3/5 rule. Right? So we now have to go back, and we have to make a fundamental case for why the Constitution matters and why the Declaration matters and why those who oppose it are advocates of tyranny and anti-human freedom.
Ben, you keep doing what you're doing. I'm a huge fan of yours, and I'm glad that it's always nice to see on our own islands that there's another island out there as well, shouting just as hard, and I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much. You're the best.
You bet. Ben Shapiro, the name of the book is Bullies, How the Left's Culture of Fear and Intimidation Silences America.